Mm-hmm. Hello, everyone. This is TSVWG, where we have arrived at the last session of the day. We have 1 hour. In today's session, we have another session tomorrow, which is 2 hours. And I'll just start the slides. There we go. Okay, let's get started. So you should be familiar with this by now. This is the IETF Note Well. Covers important policies that you agree to by joining this meeting, both in person and on MeetEcho. It covers things like our anti-harassment procedure, our code of conduct, and policies for intellectual property. We already have a note taker. Thank you, Stuart. General comment: if you want to get your drafts reviewed, please review other people's drafts as well. Our work depends on reviewing each other's work. This session is being recorded. Everybody in the room, please log into the MeetEcho tool. We use the queue. So if you want to say something, first join the queue and then line up at the mic. So progress since the last IETF meeting. We haven't published any RFCs. We have two RFCs, 2 documents with the RFC editor. And we have completed the Shepherd review of the SCTP 0 checksum draft, and it's now with the IESG. Multipath DCCP has completed working group last call, and Gori is working on the Shepherd write-up. And we expect to start working group last call for 2 documents, one of which is the UDP options, and the other one, the DPLP MTUD for UDP options.
Yeah, just quick clarification. So the Martin Duke, area director, the STV checksum draft has not gone to IETF last call yet. It's gone through working group last call, and yes, the Shepherd write-up is complete. 80 evaluation is going on, and I think that offline Zahed and Michael and I agreed to like sort of settle the issues at a call next week. So unless Zahed, who will then be in charge, has other huge objections, then we should get that to IETF last call very soon after that.
Thanks for the clarification.
And I was going to jump in on the Next slide. On MPDCCP, we've got consensus, I think, in the working group to publish. I'm waiting for some additional input from the people who reviewed last time, who did detailed reviews as part of the working group process, that they are happy with the final versions. So if you previously reviewed MPDCCP, then please send a message to the list saying you've read the latest version or whether your issues are addressed. In the meantime, I'm preparing the Shepherd write-up. I just want to confirm that we have all the changes that were requested before the working group last call.
I just wanted to point out that the NQB draft, we expect to do a working group last call on that shortly as well. So I'd like to have that added to the list.
As I pointed out earlier, reviews of documents are really appreciated. Please review other people's documents. That leaves us with these 5 remaining working group items. And we have agenda time for all of them during this meeting. So you will hear updates about these very soon. Gori, do you want to talk through this slide?
I can. We are roughly online with our working group milestones. There are things that are in the future. They're shown in green. There are things that are about ready, and they're the bottom 3. And we will, of course, update the milestones before the next meeting. Unless people have comments on the milestones, the chairs are happy with these. Shall I do the agenda or you, Martin?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. This is the agenda for session 1. We've got 3 slides of agenda. So this one refers to the meeting session today, 1 hour, and we will look at this list of drafts. There's no liaison updates at this moment. We have liaisons in place with 3GPP, especially surrounding the SCTP DTLS discussion, which comes up tomorrow. But unless people have comments on this agenda, then it's good for us. Next slide. This is the second of 3 pages. It shows the agenda for session 2. Session 2, we will take time to look at the outputs of our design team. And this will be an important part of the current meeting. And we'll also be looking at other SCTP related drafts at the same time in that session. Next slide. Oh, because we are aiming to conclude our work of our design team to produce requirements and to help us identify the proposals that we could use in this space, please have a look at the design team slides, which are in the meeting's proceedings. That will help a lot in the discussion when we come to that, and provide the opportunity to ask detailed questions of the design team or to bring things to the working group. So please have a look at that slide deck ahead of the meeting. Next slide. On the final part, there'll be a presentation on the careful resume draft, and we are going to spend the last part of the session 2 looking at topics that have bubbled up a number of times at the IETF in terms of contributions from individuals. And our aim is to have a discussion around these to see if we can identify some requirements for this particular design space so that we can make some progress in this area to understand what's in scope and what's out of scope when it comes to signaling metadata or data about connections and how we might do that in TSVWG. So this is our current agenda list. We don't expect to have additional time, and we'll take comments.
Me again. I think this probably as good a time as any to tell people that there's a scone probe off going on Thursday morning, which is about sort of explicit QoS signaling to the network, which is probably of great interest to this working group. So I encourage you to find your way over there. Thanks.
Any other agenda bashing? That is not the case, so we can jump right in.
So I'm going to give just one short introduction to this, and then Mike will take over. The transport options for UDP has been going on as an internet draft for some considerable time. And to try and finish this document, we had a discussion between the document editors, Mike, and the working group chairs to figure out what was left on the working group last call list. And this talk here has the aims of completing that process and bringing this document to a working group last call. But that decision more or less depends upon the discussion that happens in this meeting. So over to Mike, who, if you're available, you could present it, Mike.
Thank you. Next slide, please. All right. This is a little out of date because Joe has actually posted 3 more small issues, but they're small. But as of the Saturday morning, all the issues had been closed. That doesn't mean completely without controversy. A version 32 will be posted shortly, I think. The exact timing is up to Joe. That's what we think will be ready for our second working group last call, and resolve the lingering disagreements with the discussion on the list or GitHub at that point. Next slide, please. And this is the next 3 slides are how what were then remaining open issues, how they got resolved. 2 long-time ones were authentication and encryption. There are those 2, along with a third, another unsafe option, compression, are kept as placeholders in the document so that we can refer to them as examples. But the formats are not defined. The code points are simply marked as reserved, and the intended future use is documented. The former descriptions that were in the draft for authentication and unsafe encryption are now in a new draft that Joe posted recently. One that I had raised myself. The issue was try to reduce implementation complexity by limiting our per fragment options to specific ones and fixing per fragment option placement. The actual resolution is a little different. Joe points out that if we actually do have something like compression or some versions of encryption, it can actually change the length of the packet. So it would want to be up front. So that the option placement is as it was. However, something that I thought was very important got added, and that is that now all options have explicit instructions on how they should be handled if received in fragments. And that is now required also of all new options, which I think is getting clear instructions to the implementers there seems like a very good move. So I was happy with that. Next slide, please. With apologies, I'm not seeing it yet. Here we are. Thank you. The two that were related and that caused a lot of controversial discussion. I had thought, I raised this issue myself, unsafe options should not necessarily be just those that modify user data. And then Tom Herbert had raised the issues loudly about APC, which is the alternate payload checksum and authentication, thinking that if those fail, that the packet should be discarded and not passed up to the upper layer with an indication of failure. So where we are at this point, the normative definitions of unsafe in actually section 12, a typo in the slide there, that doesn't raise any controversy with me, and it didn't get further discussion. It looked fine. There is descriptive text in sections 10 and 11 that specify that these unsafe options are just those that modify payload data. The text that was proposed was deemed too vague, so it didn't go in, and it's left as it was. APC and auth remain safe options to be used as building blocks, and APC will be renamed to additional payload checksum to clarify that it's a building block. A small one raised late in the process from not one of our usual contributors, and I'm having a senior moment not remembering his name, but the issue has been addressed. We can't support options with anything that doesn't have an independent UDP length, which jumbograms don't, and the RFC was cited. Next slide, please. These three were basically editorial in nature, not, I think, interesting to spend much time on, and the fixes are queued up for version 32, uncontroversial. So next slide. And as Gory said, we're hoping for a working group last call after this meeting, and whatever comes out, we, as always, please review and comment, and thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Mike. I would like to take any questions from the working group, if there are any on that presentation. Okay, that was kind of expected, so that's good. What I am looking for, though, is a response to a request for people to review this. Could people please volunteer to review it? If you're willing to volunteer right now to read the latest version during the working group last call, then please put your name in the chat or come to the mic. because we do need document reviewers if we're going to do a working group last call. Martin.
Yeah, Martin Duke, as I'm clearly not going to get this as AD. And so since I no longer have to keep my powder dry for that, I will go ahead and review this. I'm mildly concerned that the intent of this draft is to be an end-to-end mechanism, and yet it seems to be an attractive nuisance for people to come up with not end-to-end things to do with it. But I'm going to reserve saying anything else until I read the draft. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, in the absence of further comment, please do volunteer to review the draft. I propose to start a working group last call for this item to collect questions, comments, and notes of support using the IETF mailing list. The chairs will do this after the IETF meeting and coordinate with the editor to check that we have the latest version. So please expect this to go for a working group last call for comments on the list.
Then we'll move on to L4S. Jason?
So if you were in MapRG, some of this is a bit duplicative, but this is a quick 5-minute lightning talk, it sounds like. Next slide, please. Just an update on our field trial. You can skip this one. This is just for background. All right, so here are the latest updates. The first thing that to note here, and we just finished this about a week ago, all of our backbone and other router configs have been updated to now allow ingress DSCP45. So if folks want to test NQB, they can do so. We've done it for all the residential cable modems. We haven't done it for the other last mile technologies yet. We're getting there. So we haven't done EPON fiber to the home, our Ethernet direct, or the commercial DOCSIS customers. But the bulk of our endpoints are the residential DOCSIS network. And so that should work. We think we've fixed all of them. We obviously have a few different router vendors and models. And so we've played a little bit of whack-a-mole trying to make sure that we've gotten all of the policies updated, but that's complete. So you should be able to do some NQB testing if you want. Downstream support. So we are just on the cusp of putting this into production testing. We're through beta testing in the lab. So last year we started with upstream testing in the cable modem. Now we're adding downstream testing in the CMTS. So coming soon. And then we also just did a pretty major update of the cable modem boot file. As I related earlier today in the MapRG meeting, with AQM, when we turned on DOCSIS Pi, it was very easy to do. It was really a flip of a switch. It was on or it's off, not really configurable. And we learned that we had a variety of configuration things to do, and work closely with Greg White, who's on the call here, to try to optimize some of these things. And he was a really helpful sounding board for us as we were working through different configurations, testing in the lab, and now this is rolled out in the field. So we're actually in the process of rerunning all of the tests that we did before so that we can see what the downstream result is. Next slide, which is the last one. So we continue to test. We expect to do so for a to be determined period of time, at least a little while to get through all the test cases. And then, generally speaking, stepping back for the rest of 2024, we're preparing operationally to scale to millions of users. That means a bunch of things. That means things like automated provisioning, getting that to work, getting it working in all the relevant boot files, qualifying all of the cable modems, especially the retail cable modems that are DOCSIS 3.1 that are going to support our FDX network, and all of the operational monitoring measurement sorts of things. And so that's where a lot of energy is right now, especially around monitoring. So that's it. That's a quick update on the field trials. Happy to take any questions if you have any. And it's okay if you don't. All right. Thank you.
Okay, then we'll move on to the next draft. Greg?
All right, Greg White, Cable Labs. So we'll give a quick update on the L4S ops draft, so operational guidance on coexistence with classic ECN during L4S deployment. I'm the editor of this draft. Lots of contributors have provided text for the different sections. They're all listed on the bottom of the slide here. Thanks to everyone who's contributed text for this draft. Next slide, please. So the scope of this draft is to address some of the concerns that were raised during the standardization of L4S around what would happen if L4S traffic shared a single queue or shared queue RFC 3168 or classic ECN bottleneck and shared that with classic traffic. So whether that's ECN, classic ECN, or just drop based congestion control traffic. And then the potential for L4S traffic to get more than its fair share of the bottleneck link bandwidth. For those who will remember that discussion, there was a lot of debate as to whether these bottlenecks actually existed in the network, and some studies to try to identify whether they did or didn't. But nonetheless, and I don't think that there was ever conclusive proof that they did, but nonetheless, they could exist at some point in the future if they don't already today. And so this draft gives guidance for operators of end hosts to try to identify if such bottlenecks exist, operators of networks who may deploy such bottlenecks with guidance for how they can avoid issues, and then some guidance for researchers who might want to be looking for such bottlenecks in the network. At the time that this draft was created, we agreed to keep it as a living document after the L4S drafts were published as RFC. And as network operators begin deployment of L4S experiments, so that any experience and knowledge that's gained during that process can be rolled in to the document. And the milestone, as was listed previously, is to wrap this up by November of this year. That said, there have not been any contributions recently. The last substantive changes were made in 2021. So I guess a question to the working group is, should we continue to keep this open all the way to November? Should we, working group last call it, open for comments on that? And it looks like Martin.
Yeah, Martin Duke, Google, no hats. So are the initial L4S deployment experiments done? And if so, like, what's the scope of them?
In terms of live network experiments, the Comcast one that Jason just discussed earlier in MapRG is the only live network experiment that I'm aware of. And whether you could say it's done or not, obviously it's still in progress. They're studying the behavior upstream and downstream, but yeah, I think they will continue.
All right, this is maybe a little bit too much to fully discuss at the mic, but I mean, and I could be massively misinformed here, but I don't think like any major clients are currently doing anything with. Well, I shouldn't say that. iOS has it as a non-default option, if I'm not mistaken. I know that Chrome is well behind that, and Android is well behind that. Like I don't know if any like major servers out there are deploying things. I don't know what this. I don't really recall like the details of this agreement that we're going to sort of capture initial experiment. So if the intent was always to ship this document without like wide deployment experience, that's fine if that was the agreement. But I don't feel like we're at a point of wide deployment. And Stuart probably has way more better information than me, so I'll yield the mic.
No, it's not better information. Just maybe I wanted to share our perspective. And I'm sure everybody in this room is well aware of the challenges in networking of the chicken and egg problem. It's very hard to get network operators to deploy L4S at the bottleneck queues when the management says, well, tell me what clients will make use of this information, and the answer is none. And it's hard to argue at companies like Apple about why the clients should use L4S signaling when the management says, well, tell me which networks provide this, and the answer is none. So that's why it's taken a long time to get to this point, but that's why we come to IETF meetings and hackathon and have interop events and all try to work together. So I am very happy that Cable Labs has done the work they have. I'm happy that Comcast is rolling out a trial. At this point, I think the main victory of the trial is to show that it doesn't break anything. If the Comcast cable modems, I see Jason nodding in the front row for people who didn't see that. If the cable modems can enable the L4S queue and all the customers don't notice any problems, then that is the first step towards getting this deployed. We're doing our best at Apple to hold up our part of this bargain with L4S in TCP, L4S in QUIC, for applications that don't run over one of those transport protocols like FaceTime video conferencing. We're working with that team for them to be using L4S to reduce the queuing delay and reduce the packet loss. So all of this stuff is coming to market at the same time. And I'm pretty optimistic in the next 12 months with Comcast rolling it out for millions of customers and Apple doing our part to have things like FaceTime in the future making use of that. I think we're going to see a switch flip where people suddenly see that their video calls are much, much better quality. And then hopefully we'll see the rest of the industry follow suit pretty quickly, because somebody has to set the example here and lead the way. And that's what we're trying to do.
If you don't mind me interjecting there, Gory, this back and forth. Thank you for that update, Stuart. That's great. I mean, look, I absolutely agree that, you know, chicken and egg, we have to move this forward. I'm just asking a narrow question about this draft. I think it's easy for me to say because I'm not writing it, but if it was backed by the experience of Apple already having deployed both ends of this connection, you know, at scale with, you know, Comcast having deployed the router bit of this at scale, I think that's a much more effective document. Now, we shouldn't wait forever for that, or a very long time for that, but I'm just interested in other people's perspective if they think that's accurate, or if we should just like kind of go what we have now and last call this.
I agree with what you're suggesting, Martin. I think this could continue as a living document for a while until the dust has settled and things stop changing. So I would be supportive of that.
Looks like Gory, next in queue.
Jason, you can jump me.
Yeah, just real quick, I'll agree. I mean, I think no harm in keeping it open and then updating it with anything that we've learned, you know, in trial and deployment. Thanks. I said it in the chat as well.
I was going to jump in at the end as a working group chair to try and figure out what to do, but I think people are starting to say already what I was hoping. I was hoping the document would be updated, and we currently have a milestone of November. That still doesn't look totally out there. We have a number of working group items which are currently maturing. We'll go through their working group last calls. This looks like something which is a great document to have. I'm not hearing anybody saying we have to publish this as an RFC because someone's waiting for it. If that's the case, then please make yourself known. Otherwise, I would personally prioritize the NQB draft and get that one published because it's a protocol spec. But please push back now if you think there's something more to say on this.
I just remembered the other quick comment I wanted to make, which is slightly off topic for the document, but Martin's comments made me think about it, and I think it's important to say. I'm at the point where I want to work out what we need to do to work with the Linux community to get L4S support into mainline Linux, and that means accurate ECN and the Prague congestion controller, because of course most data centers are not actually running Mac OS on their servers, they're running Linux. So there's a limit to what Apple can do there, but I really think we need to reach out to the Linux networking maintainers and start making better progress on that.
I should just stay by the mic. So if Neil's out there, Neil knows more about this than I do in terms of the Linux situation. But but one issue with accurate ECN, I think, is that it's not yet gone to RFC. And judging from the TSVM meeting I just came from, the chairs have that, so it's not a million miles away. So that's at least one roadblock that will clear, hopefully, on the order of months.
Okay, seeing no other comments.
But won't be RFC for a little while, though, Martin. Yeah. So yeah, that is also part of this puzzle. But go ahead, Greg.
All right, so if we're keeping the draft open, I guess I would like to encourage people to do experiments, look for additional things that we could add to the draft to improve it. So yeah, let's not just keep it open and I'm getting kind of tired of just re-upping the draft and changing the draft number and that's it. So yeah, please provide contributions. Thanks. I think we can go on then to the next slide deck. Or I just wanted to give a brief update on the L4S interoperability events. Go on to the next slide, please. As folks are probably aware, we've been running a number of interoperability events to test L4S implementations, both the endpoint implementations, congestion controllers, and accurate ECN implementations, as well as the network part of it with the ECN congestion signaling. We've had a series of them coinciding with IETF meetings, 4 of them in total so far. We did not have one for this IETF just due to travel schedules and some of the individuals who have been running those events and participating in those events not being able to travel to the IETF 119. Alongside the IETF events, Cable Labs has been hosting a series of L4S interops as well at our laboratories near Denver. We've had 6 of them so far. Most recent one was just last month. And a good mix of both network equipment and network operators, as well as the endpoint applications, TCP, QUIC, and proprietary transports for different applications have been participating. Next opportunities, we plan to hold the next one at Cable Labs in end of April, and registration is already open for that. So if anyone is interested in participating, please click the link on the slide or reach out to me via email. And then also intend to hold another IETF interop at 120 meeting in Vancouver in July. So just want to give that quick update and invite people to bring their implementations and continue testing. And that's it for that short item, unless there are questions or comments. All right. I see Genji in the queue.
Yes, Tianji, CMCC here. It's not a question about the testing you're done here, just to try to ask one scenario whether has been covered or not. Because for the Alpha S, we have some case like when a router, or called this is 5GS, when a UPF does have a marking for Alpha S, and then it's going to have another layer of encryption, like the GTP, UDP IP for the external. But the thing is, when that one put on the N3, the external IP may not have the Alpha S setting. So in order to accelerate, for Alpha S mark the packet, what should be done? So basically, how to penetrate to have the internal Alpha S marking toward the external side.
Right. So in tunneling protocols, the recommendation is that at the tunnel ingress, the originating ECN field be propagated to the outer IP header, so that network elements along the path can mark congestion, or they can see the ECT value and then mark congestion if needed. And then at the tunnel decapsulation, that the outer mark gets copied into the inner IP header. And there is I think it's still a draft that provides guidelines for ECN encapsulation.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure what the status of that is, but there is
No
a draft
problem.
on
Yeah.
ECN.
So since that's being handled already, right, taken care already. So it's like I just try to get whether we have something in IETF already that can handle this type of case. So thank you.
Yeah, RFC 6040 BIS is the draft that he's talking about. RFC 6040 BIS, 6040.
Thanks, Martin. Okay. If there are no other questions, we can move on to the next slide deck. All right, NQB PHB draft. So we're up to draft number 22. I'll be presenting also on behalf of my co-authors, Thomas and Rudiger. You can go on to the next slide. Status of the draft is we ran a working group last call on this draft a little over a year ago. There were a number of comments that came in during that last call, and even further comments after the last call finished. We ended up publishing 7 new versions of the document in 2023. At the last IETF meeting, 118, we had discussed starting a working group last call shortly after the meeting. I reached out to a few people to ask them to review the draft as part of the working group last call. and one of them jumped the gun and did a detailed review before the working group last call started, and that led to another draft 22, which just got published a month ago. Milestone remains to submit this as a proposed standard by December 2023. So we're already past that, but hopefully we can get this wrapped up fairly soon. Next slide talks a little bit about the details of the recent review. And Bob Briscoe did a detailed review. I have a link to his comments there. There were a few technical comments and a long list of nits. I think all of these have been resolved. I'll just briefly talk about the technical comments. First one was that the draft didn't provide any requirements on limiting burstiness from the PHP. So one of the things that had been identified in the L4S drafts as they were progressing was the need to limit the burstiness or recommend limiting burstiness of links that support L4S. Very similarly, it makes sense for implementations of the NQB PHP to also limit the amount of burstiness that they introduce into the traffic stream that continues downstream from them. So a new section was added to discuss that aspect and requirements around that. Second item, there were a couple of comments related to the section on interoperability with non-diff-serve capable domains. And specifically the comments, paraphrased here, that there were three options provided. One is that the upstream domain remarks all NQB traffic to 0, which was the primary recommendation in the draft. And then other options were to use traffic protection and only remark the offending traffic. And lastly, use traffic protection and drop the offending traffic. The comments were that drop should be discouraged in this context, that the other mechanisms are preferred, and drop was kind of draconian here, where the traffic protection really is not identifying queuing delay that's happening in the downstream domain. It's just kind of a preemptive traffic protection. And then the second part of the comment was that rather than recommending that remarking all traffic to 0, well, rather than recommending that as the primary recommendation, that traffic protection should be the primary recommendation. After further discussion with the other authors and Bob, we did agree to discourage the packet drop option, but decided to leave the other two options as equal footing rather than having one be a primary recommendation and one being an alternate. So I believe that resolves that pair of comments. And then the other technical comments were on traffic protection. There were a few related to that section. So one, it wasn't clear that traffic protection was intended to be implemented locally at the PHP node. And then kind of adding to that confusion was that policing at the ingress edge was also discussed in that section. So it sort of left it unclear as to what the distinction was there. And so the ask was for more clarity between traffic protection and traffic conditioning, and really spell that out better. And then add the option of reclassifying traffic without remarking as a third possible action. So the traffic protection section included already reclassification with remarking and packet drop as two possible actions. And the suggestion here was to add this third possible action. And then there were a few other minor changes. So I think we've tackled all of those with some significant changes in section 5.2. Hopefully that makes it a lot more clear for people who pick this up for the first time. And then the long list of NITs that Bob found, those were all resolved by late in December. I put a pointer to the mailing list post where we discussed all those items. So that's it for the changes in draft 22. And next slide. So at this point, I think the authors feel that we have addressed all the changes that came out of working group last call, and all the changes that came out of comments after working group last call. All the issues in the GitHub issue tracker are closed. So I think the next slide says, let's begin working group last call.
So Gory joined the queue, but apparently he's having some connectivity issues. Does anybody else have comments on this draft?
All right. I think that's it then. Please, if we start a working group last call, please review the draft and know if you find any other issues.
And with that, we've completed the agenda for today, 8 minutes early. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for taking notes, Stuart. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.